Hello and welcome to my fifth video on IB psychology. Today we're talking about the biological perspective. My name is Linnea Karlberg and I'm a Swedish IB 12 student. If you pause the video right now, you can read what the IB requires you to know about hormones. Hormones are chemicals released by specific glands in the body to regulate medium and long-term changes in the body, and they're released directly into the bloodstream. There are 50 different in the human body, and they're collectively responsible for a variety of communication purposes and functions. Some hormones, such as adrenaline, also act as neurotransmitters, which we talked about in the last video, and can produce instantaneous effects on mood and attention. But overall, hormones have slower effect on behavior than neurotransmitters. And this is an example of a hormone, oxytocin. It's known to have an effect in the expression of milk from the milk ducts in females. It's also associated with stimulation of uterus, which makes the body ready for childbirth. And it's also connected to interpersonal trust, affection, pair bonding, love, and attraction. So quite a positive hormone, I would say. And a study that looked into oxytocin is Baumgartner et al. In 2008. Which investigated the role of oxytocin in creating trust. So the researcher did a laboratory experiment with 49 participants placed in an fMRI scanner. There was an experimental condition which received oxytocin via a nasal spray, as well as a control condition which received a placebo via a nasal spray. So, of course, the participants did not know what condition they belonged in. The participant then participated in several rounds of economic trust game involving financial risk, in which they acted as investors with other trustees. They also were engaged in a risk game played against a computer. After this was done, they got feedback, indicating that about 50% of their decisions resulted in poor investment because their trust was broken. So the researchers were then interested in the differences between investment decisions before and after they knew about this broken trust. And what did they found? Well, the placebo group were more likely to decrease their rates of trust after they had been briefed that their trust had been broken, versus the oxytocin group, they continued to invest at comparable rates. It did not seem to matter to them that their trust had been broken by their partner. The oxytocin group also showed decreased responses in the caudate nucleus, which is known to have some sort of effect with reward behaviors and trust, as well as the amygdala. And the result was only apparent when the participants played the trust game, not the risk game that was done on the computer. So the oxytocin's effect on trust are exclusively interaction with real people. And it seems that oxytocin decreased fear reactions that may arise as a consequence of human betrayal. Also, that it encourages trust. Or another alternative explanation could be that it makes it more difficult to learn from mistakes made while trusting people. Evaluating the study, it shows that a statistically significant correlation between oxytocin and behavioral adaptation after feedback in regard to trust and risk-taking. And it was especially during its publication pioneering. It has also been triangulated by other research. For instance, Kosfeld et al. In 2005 found that increasing oxytocin in participants increased their willingness to engage in social risk. And they used fMRI technology to precisely locate localized effects. There's been data triangulation. It was a strong design and a big sample, especially when you're using fMRI. It was a single blind experiment. They used a control group. And the trust was appeared, it's a crucial component of social existence. Elucidate biological elements of trust are highly significant, and the study could help explain the dynamics of trust in human relationship, as well as inform how humans reestablish trust after violation by a significant other. And it could provide insight into mental disorders that involve a lack of trust, like autism and social phobias. However, it's unclear how this all happens, and it's possible that demand characteristics were involved, which minimizes the ecological validity. Also, definition of trust. Is it a function of willingness to invest in spite of knowledge of broken trust, or is this more lack of fear or delusion of threat? Also, presumably, the participants took the game seriously. They were interested in achieving maximal beneficial outcomes. And it's possible that some of the participants in the experimental condition were generally more trustworthy than others. They didn't necessarily control for that. Overall, the function of oxytocin is complex, and it's simplistic to say that it only creates trust. Another hormone is testosterone. This is known as a sex hormone, both in males and females. In men, the majority is produced by the testes, and some by the adrenal gland. And in women, it's produced in the ovaries and adrenal gland. So this hormone facilitates sexual maturation and stimulates sperm production, and it aids in creation of muscle mass and bone strength. It's also involved with voice tone development during puberty, aggression, downregulation of trust. And there's this bit of controversy or questioning if high testosterone leads to violence. A social status function of testosterone related to winning and losing rather than purely aggression could be possible, but overall it's linked to hierarchy and dominance. So Boss et al. In 2010 looked into the role increased testosterone has on interpersonal trust. This was a double-blind repeated measures design and a laboratory experiment. So 24 young women with a mean age of 20.2 years were sampled through opportunity sampling. And what they did was they first came in and gave saliva samples, and this was the baseline testosterone levels. They went to the lab on two conditions, where they administered either a 0.5 milligram of testosterone via oral dosage or placebo, and then they engaged in a trustworthiness task. Compared as a whole, the research found no statistically significant difference in trustworthiness ratings between the conditions. When they separated the participants, placebo trustworthiness ratings were either high rating trusting or low trusting groups. And the testosterone did not affect participants in the low trusting group. Testosterone lowered the trust behavior in the baseline high trusting group. So the research suggested that testosterone downregulates interpersonal trust in an adaptive manner in highly trusting people. This study allowed insight into the hormonal regulation of human society. It gives insight into testosterone selectively downregulating and interpersonal behavior. We also used a counterbalance repeated measures design, which allowed for comparison of trust change within the same participants and randomized the order of placebo and testosterone condition, and that minimizes the confounding variables. Also, they controlled for possible variance in natural testosterone levels due to menstrual cycle, and this was also a double-blind procedure, which reduced the participant and researcher bias. However, the study had quite low ecological validity, and the rating methodology was somehow artificial in using a scale weighting system, and the participants could have differing concepts of what trustworthy is. There was also a questioning of issues of protection of harm. Another study of testosterone, like I said, there is this belief that perhaps testosterone has to do with violence, that it's linked. So Dabbs et al. Looked into the link between testosterone and the types of violent crimes males commit. And this was a correlational study which measured testosterone in the saliva of 692 male prisoners. They looked at their criminal records and separated the violent versus non-violent crimes. And they found that testosterone levels predicted violent crimes, so like homicide and rape. And testosterone level may affect the type of violent crimes criminals commit then. First of all, this was a huge sample. However, they did not use females, and they did not account for environmental factors. And there could possibly be confounding variables involved here, like for instance the motivation for committing the crimes. There may be a difference between senseless violence or acts of vengeance. I also want to note that in a later replication, They did this with female crimes, and then they added an extra category of defensive violence, which defined as females being violent towards their perpetrator that had abused them in the past, and they found the same results. Then another study that looked into this was testosterone levels change when you win a chess match. So what they did, they measured the testosterone in chess players and found that chess players who had won had a higher testosterone than players who had lost. And chess is not violent, yet the testosterone increased. So testosterone, it may be more related to winning and gaining social status and hierarchy, dominance, rather than just being more aggressive. Another study looking into this was Fry et al. In 2011. That was a testosterone level change when you win a wrestling match. So they measured the blood and testosterone in wrestlers, 12 wrestlers before and after their match. And they found that testosterone increased for both winners and losers. So the winners, however, had a higher increase than losers. So winning increases your testosterone more than losing does. But what does this really mean? Once again, I would propose that it connects it to the dominance, hierarchy, and social status. Testosterone, does it really have to do with how aggressive they were, or only related to winning the match? Losers may decrease testosterone. Does that mean they reduce their aggression to the dominant other? Also, once again, no females were in the sample, which makes us question the generalizability. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.